Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. Today's conversation and topic is all about financial planning, finances, financial independence, ethical, responsible investing, as well as succession planning. I've got a fantastic guest with me today, Darryl Lyons. He's a CFP, and it's going to be a fantastic discussion. So, Darryl, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're also a podcast host called Retire in Texas. I'm also in Texas too. But tell people your story and what you do and how you came to be about.
Yeah. So to make a short story long, I really grew up without money, and we had struggled over the years. We ended up living in a little trailer on the side of the road in Castroville, Texas, and I just was always curious about money. Probably about age 18, that curiosity never stopped. Went to undergraduate school, postgraduate work, and just studying money and being curious about it. I started Retire in Texas. By the way, I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called PAX Financial Group. And so I started Retire in Texas because I was having incredible conversations, kneecap to kneecap, people who had transitioned into retirement. And I was getting more qualitative information that I thought was pretty valuable. Just stories about how people transitioned successfully, emotionally. But it was hard to articulate those conversations. So I decided to do a podcast where I interviewed all of them and had a great response. So I'm interviewing, I probably interviewed 50 or 60 of people that I knew that had transitioned from working to retirement. And when I got through my I guess you would call it natural market, I didn't have any more people. I mean, I did, but it was sporadic. And then I started moving it to just individual market commentary, which has been a blast, just kind of giving people hope in the midst of the chaos that we hear in the marketplace, whether it's the debt ceiling or just political issues. I try to frame the markets in such a way that people can digest it in the context of their personal lives. So how does this affect me, whether rising interest rates or rising gas prices, how does this actually impact me? And I look at life, frankly, through a Christian worldview. I try to not to preach too much, but that's just the lens I look at things through. And so I express that in about a 15-minute conversation on Retire in Texas.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have, this conversation. We're going to talk about government and how people distrust the government. And we'll talk about, new technologies, financial innovations, which a lot of bad actors have got into. But, real quick, kind of the basics is you were extremely interested in money and you made this really, and I really love spiritual based investing because it's based on a lot of good values and principles. I think the world has really become immoral and corrupt, but it's good to have individuals such as yourself. So kind of talk about this idea of spiritual-based responsible investing, like values, how it can help you and your family, etc.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't have one in front of me, but here it is. So this will be coming out. This is my book that'll be coming out on that subject. I'll give you more information on that, but let me answer your question first, because the point is not to pitch a book. The point is, sorry, I didn't mean to come that way. I get excited because there is an appetite, something different in the investment marketplace, because when you invest in a company, you actually have ownership of a company, and ownership implies some type of responsibility. I own a small business, right? And so I'm one of 9 owners, so I have a certain responsibility. But we tend to discount that responsibility when we own shares of a company through a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund. We can kind of discount and set aside that ownership. But what we've seen in the marketplace is that it does matter. And for the last several years, there's been a growing corporate shift to an area called ESG. The ESG has taken on, rather than, the name is environment, social governance. So at first glance, you might think that it has good intentions, but there has been some hijacking of that to push through some agendas that may actually be antithetical to the shareholders' worldview. Does that make sense? Like, it's happening, and I see it. I actually see it a lot because I'm very much engaged with Wall Street. I have conversations with the big BlackRocks and the Vanguards on a very intimate level with some of their executive teams. So I've known what's been going on over the last several years. But there comes a time where you say, enough's enough. And how can we collectively pool our assets together in such a way that we can raise our hand and say, we disagree with what you're doing. And it does take a concerted effort. And I think there's been a collective voice that's been happening and some resistance. And so I play a small role of putting a pebble in the shoe of some of the asset managers we work with to have them second guess their agenda, which they believe to be true, that there's another different opinion out there. And we believe in diversity of opinion. And so we want to make sure that we kind of help another group of people that have a lot of influence in the marketplace think before they act. And we're seeing this have a lot of success. So when people invest with us, we do traditional like retirement planning like everyone else, but somebody might come to us and we might say, do you find that values investing is important to you? And if they do, then we will open up a framework of different investment solutions that might work for them. If not, then we've got the normal secular stuff. And then what we also find that's very interesting is that some of the asset managers that work in the values-based investing, they do something called proxy voting, where they will actually vote on behalf of their shareholders, because shareholders get these proxy votes and they throw them away. But we're actually trying to find asset managers that can vote on behalf of the values of our shareholders. And it's really hard to be completely aligned 100% with these asset managers. You may have, like my worldview is a biblical worldview, and I use biblical responsible investors, and not all of their framework of screening is 100% aligned with mine, but I just, to what I look at is, are they mostly aligned, and they're voting and they're actually making a difference. There's been actually, I can think of one case just recently where one of the managers that we use had Costco in their portfolio, and Costco started using their profits to promote some activism that was what we saw to be antithetical to this profile, to our investors' profile. So the CEO of this investment management firm called the CFO of Costco and said, hey, you're using your profits for something that you initially told us you didn't do. The CFO said, wait a minute, is that true? And found out it was a rogue branch of Costco, I think in Georgia, that was doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. And so they stopped that. And so those are the little things that we can do in the marketplace to start to have the pendulum swing. And we're playing a role in that and finding it to be pretty valuable for our clients' lives. And at the same time, sorry to be long-winded, we want to make sure that we don't, as a result of using a framework to screen out companies, we want to make sure we don't lose portfolio returns. And the marketplace, this is why about 3 years ago, I just got into this space, because prior to 3 years ago, there was a drop off in portfolio returns, namely because of the cost of execution. Because of technology, even AI, the cost of executing these types of features has been minimized. And so we're not seeing that drop off in performance, and research is testifying to that. So sorry to be long-winded, but it's obviously a passion place for me.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, this whole ESG thing, and just, climate change. Here in Texas, we had a really bad drought, and, it's September and it's still 90 degrees. One question I have is with, CFP and spiritual-based investing, you have this, but, one thing is, how do you reconcile spiritual-based investing with what's going on Wall Street, with the government, where taxes are going to waste, and then, pretty much the U.S. system is broke and just keeps borrowing, and there's so much greed. Is that just headlines, or is that really happening, or, what are you seeing?
Well, there's no doubt, our government's spending more than they're making. And I think it's incumbent upon us as Americans to take inventory of our own habits. We aren't that good at saving. We aren't that good at taking care of our health. And as a byproduct of not really, and not everyone's this way, right? But many of us are. And so as a result, the government has tried to fill that void of both healthcare and future investments and future pensions, which is Social Security. So we look at the two items on the balance sheet or the income statement of United States, and it's Social Security, Medicare. Those are the two major issues that we're dealing with. Military is maybe third, but those two, Medicare and Social Security, are the big ones. And 9 years Social Security is done, it's toast. And so unfortunately, we've got to just do a better job of saving, and Americans need to save 15% of our gross income. I mean, we just can't. We have to stop depending on the government for that. And I know that's not everyone's in a situation to do that. Look, I've been poor and I've been rich, and I know it's a challenge. Even frankly, both of those situations, probably more when it's poor and you don't have 15%. But we've got to start saving 15% of our gross income. And then secondly, in regards to our health care, we have to consider our health care and taking care of our future selves. And the traditional health insurance marketplace has options. And again, being in the kind of, what we consider ourselves as fiduciaries who honor Judeo-Christian values. And we do look at alternatives, traditional healthcare. For example, there's a couple different alternatives out there called MediShare and Samaritan Ministries that have been around for over 20 years that are, I think, very viable solutions for people to get some type of quasi coverage. I've used it and I feel very comfortable with it. So there is, I think, at the end of the day, there is too much dependence on a government that is extremely flawed. And the only thing that we can do is control what we control. And I think it's incumbent upon us to think of our future selves a little differently.
Yeah. I love that. Basically, people taking responsibility. It starts with good habits, just basically saving, honesty, integrity, taking care of yourself, spending less than you make, exercising, working out, these types of things, follow through what you say you're going to do. I think we steered far away from just, basic. This question is, one thing is talking about is, what is pivot retirement planning and why is it different?
Yeah, good question. So pivot, the idea is sitting down with all these people over the years, which are great people that were transitioning in retirement. If you look up the definition of retirement, it's the disposition of an asset over its useful life. The disposition of an asset over its useful life. And so I thought about that. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want my clients, my community to have a life that's no longer useful. So how can we pivot? In fact, a client said, I'm not going to retire, I'm going to pivot. And so I took it from them. And I haven't stopped using it. All my office uses it, my community uses it, my clients. And pivoting means we're pivoting into a chapter that's just different. When you retire, if you think about somebody who retires, there's like a 40%, I think Harvard did this study, you can double check me on this, 40% probability that you'll have a heart attack, increase in probability you'll have a heart attack 1 year after you retire. And so how do you transition, how do you pivot in such a way? And they asked a group of 9-year-old women, if you could do anything different in life, what would you do different? And they said they'd do 3 things. They would stop and smell the roses, they would take more risk, and they would do something that would outlive them. And so rather than having a life of maybe Fox News and flower beds that you just kind of sit around, what can you do that has a material impact? You've got wisdom, you've got time, and maybe you've got a little money. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to start pivoting rather than retiring. And I think we'll all have a better life accordingly. And a lot of people, there's a whole generation of people that didn't receive the mentoring and the fathering that they needed. And then there's an aging population, a silver tsunami of people that have the resources, the time and energy. And if they could just find a way to reach down and help those people, I think our country will be in a much better place. But it doesn't happen if we retire. It only happens if we pivot.
Yeah, I love that. And things talking about is this idea of, you talk about this idea of behavioral finance. Well, what is that?
Yeah, behavioral finance is kind of the foundational piece of how we operate at our organization. So it's a collision of neuroscience, psychology, and traditional finance, which it sounds like a lot, but when it comes down to it, it's for us, it's making sure that we have some type of framework and system when we're sitting down with the client kneecap to kneecap, that we understand their priorities, their goals and values, not only the what we would say the money nerd in the family, but also what we might also say the non-CFO spouse, the one that doesn't like to talk about money. We want to grab from them the very heart of what it means to be thinking about money. For example, I've sat down with somebody and said, what's most important to you? And it's actually a very structured, organized way to ask questions. But what's most important to you? And I remember a spouse saying, well, I want to leave a legacy to my family because we didn't have anything when my parents died, and I was without. I had to climb out of a hole, and that's so important that I capture that and memorialize that. Sometimes it's even a surprise to the spouse who's been married 20 or 30 years that was that important to her. So it's taking inventory of those values and priorities, and then aligning it with the money decision. So now every decision that they make, maybe not every decision, but the material money decisions they make, I have to make sure, it's my responsibility as their guide to make sure that the money decisions they make align with that priorities, and there's not a disconnect or cognitive distance between those two things. And so that's really the very essence of behavioral finance, is matching values and priorities and goals with money decisions and keeping those things aligned. Not just doing it in one transactional sense and doing a little paper exercise, but making sure that everything you do along the journey of life is consistent. We don't have inconsistency between, if we think about inconsistency of our words and our behaviors, but there's a lot of inconsistencies between our behaviors and our money, and I try to align those things up a little bit better. And it's through the process of, it's an academic process rooted in Daniel Kahneman's work, Thinking Fast and Slow, but it's behavioral finance.
Yeah, I think what led the recent Nobel Prizes in economics were in behavioral finances and really talking about markets. Really fascinating. I've always interested in reading about these guys. The other thing is you talk about Giving Challenge and being on the Ramsey Advisory Council. What is that?
Yeah, so I used to work closely with Dave Ramsey. He had an advisory council. Yeah, Dave Ramsey's a financial guru out of Nashville. I'm assuming that, not everybody knows about him. Believe it or not, it's funny when I talk to my friends on Wall Street, they don't know Dave Ramsey. They probably should. He's influenced more people with their money than any financial person. But I really enjoyed Dave for many years, and he is a very sincere guy. And I worked on his advisory council and helped him just wrestle with some business decisions over the years. And it was just an honor and a pleasure to be a part of that council. And so, frankly, Dave was a good tailwind. He was the catalyst for our success as an organization at our company, PAX Financial Group. I don't really connect with his team that often anymore, just kind of went in a different direction, but very amicable and very respectful of what they've done and they continue to do. So that's the Ramsey. What was the other one that you asked about?
The other thing that we were talking about was this idea is Giving Challenge, and you also started a ministry in Moldova. Talk about that.
Oh goodness, gosh. So the Giving Challenge is every year we take inventory of our so I'll mention this in the Giving Challenge real quick. Every year we take inventory of our business, and if we have something that we have a methodology that we do this. But we basically say, hey, did we have more profit than we thought? And if so, then we give a portion of those profits to nonprofits in our community, and we have our team select those nonprofits. And it's a fun way. We actually do a production of it. They're on YouTube. You can check them out, the Giving Challenge. But a couple things that happened on the Giving Challenge, we videotaped two of them. And I say videotape, YouTube, whatever you call it now, but we've produced two videos, and those are online. You can check those out, and there's a lot of fun. And then the ministry in Moldova. So there's this guy who played for the San Antonio Spurs. He's a Hall of Famer. His name's David Robinson, and him and I connected with a guy in Moldova, which is Eastern Europe and Ukraine. They have ministries in Ukraine and Moldova. Kind of drifts into Romania sometimes, but mainly Moldova. And they get kids off the streets onto the basketball courts and teach them about life and Jesus and leadership. And it's growing up over there. And so what we had to do when we connected with them overseas, because there was a real need and starvation and a hole of hope over there, because it's former communist culture and concrete buildings and not a lot of hope. So when we were able to just invest a little time and resources and money over there, it's blossomed and it's become competitive basketball, and it's creating some incredible leaders. And it's actually giving a lot of hope. In fact, I was talking to a guy this morning that's running part of the ministry in Ukraine. He's got 5 kids. He's a coach in Ukraine, a former professional basketball player, and he refuses to leave Ukraine. Because, and his family's there because of the kids that he coaches. And it gives me goosebumps on my goosebumps, because that's real commitment to the lives of others. And so what can I do over here to help support those individuals? I can write them a check and I can cheer them on, but they're doing a lot of the hard work. And so it's called the Admirals Basketball Academy. Really proud of the way they've stepped up given the environment in Ukraine.
Yeah, I love that. And we know we're coming to the close of the conversation, which I really enjoyed, talking with you about. Before we close it out, one question I love to ask, I'm very curious, is have clients come to you asking questions about digital assets? I hate using the word cryptocurrency because has such a negative connotation, and it's like filled with so many bad actors and just criminals. And so my question is, have people come to you asking about digital assets, and what are your thoughts on the space?
Yeah, and we're one of the few RIAs in the country that actually have a methodology to have our clients own digital assets. We're comfortable with it, namely Bitcoin and Ethereum. We can do some peripheral stuff. Gemini's the custodian there, for lack of a better word, and so we're comfortable with it. But obviously the risk, the amount of exposure you have relative to your entire portfolio it's got to be less than 5% at this point. And we're still trying to figure out the behavior. I mean, in the investment world, we have what we call, correlation is an important terminology, is to understand the correlation between that as an asset class relative to other types of investments. And so, you can get exposure to the NASDAQ, which is a composite generally of technology companies, and you can see there's still a high correlation of these alternative assets and NASDAQ. Now, sometimes those correlations break, but I still don't have a good risk profile of it to put a meaningful bet or investment. So, when you have less than 5%, it can behave however it wants, and it's not going to ruin your future. And so we're not terribly opposed to, a hard storage type of environment, those types of either Ethereum or Bitcoin, but we don't actually go out and promote it. It's mainly because a client says, I want it, and then we have a method to adopt it.
Basically, what you're describing is basically a very nascent industry, hasn't quite matured yet. Still has to go through, regulatory approval, and it's just still early beginnings. Yeah, but it's good to have exposure, in case the price, suddenly spikes and you have exposure to that, or as long as, you're talking about affording the downside risk, 5% or less, that's not going to kill you if it goes to zero, which is interesting. But again, what's interesting is always, it's like technology was like the internet boom, just very early days, the gold rush, which is really interesting. Yeah, and I love this idea where you're talking about you still don't have a handle on it just because it's so early. How can people contact you, follow you, reach out to you, check out your work, etc.?
Yeah, first of all these questions, every single one of them, I want to talk for like 30 minutes because it's so enjoyable, like even crypto, and it's such a fascinating topic. I mean, everything. You covered so much in so short amount of time, and I do have a passion for what I do. And so people can connect with me so many different ways. I mean, LinkedIn's good because it's a good professional way to connect with me. And then, of course, PAX Financial Group, PAX Financial Group is a good way. I will have that book I mentioned. I'll have that available for pre-sale soon. And then there's some gifts that you get when you do the pre-sale, but it hasn't launched yet. So it'll officially launch probably January. My publisher, I think, has a January 30th launch date. I have several other books out there, but that's the one I've been out there promoting kind of. And by the way, all proceeds of that book, it's called Biblical Responsible Investing. All proceeds go to these 4 kids that live in my house. So just thank you for the promotional there. But PAX Financial Group and LinkedIn are the 2 best sites.
Excellent. And for all the audience, let's thank Darryl for coming on. I really enjoyed this talk about just responsible investing, and just talking about different reconciling differences. And all of Darryl's resources will be in the links and show notes, and when his book comes out, that'll be included as well. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.